solution for the manufacturing industry. We'll briefly show you the benefits of this solution targeted to this industry. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Mark Huseman. He's a Solution Engineering Director here at Emergis. And Mark has spent the last 20 years in the software business with less than focus on SAP. In this 20 years, Mark has dealt with hundreds of prospects and customers in the manufacturing, wholesale, and service industries. Just before moving to the software world, Mark has spent 5 years working in a high-volume, multifaceted HVAC, automotive, and life sciences production facility with discrete processes, repetitive, and project manufacturing initiatives in place. Just another known fact here is that Mark also spent 5 years working on an anti-submarine warfare testing government project directly out of college. So just before I turn this session over to Mark, I would also like to mention that the whole session will be recorded and everyone will receive a copy of this webinar. And since this is a brief webinar, we would appreciate if you could submit your questions to me, and if time permits, we will go over them at the end of the session. Otherwise, we will definitely email our responses back to you. As always, we expect you will find today's session, even though brief, valuable to you and useful to your organization. I will now turn control over to Mark, who will provide you a glimpse on our Emergis AES solution for your industry.
Thank you, Ivan. Appreciate the intro. So we're going to go through just quickly from an agenda perspective, a little intro about SAP as a company, and then a little bit about Emergis as a partner of SAP's. I'll give you an overview of what how the demonstration is going to work. We'll actually execute it, and then just kind of summarize, everything we've seen. So SAP we could talk a lot about. I try to keep it simple, and really this, to me, is a single screen that we can talk a lot from. So contrary to potentially popular belief, SAP is for the small and medium enterprise. As you can see, 67% of the customer base that uses SAP is in the 0 to 500 million space. So it's not just for the Fortune 100s, the Fortune 500s. It's really being utilized more by the small and medium-sized businesses than anybody else. So that's the graphic. And the other point that I think speaks real volumes about SAP is the third statement on the right, which is the amount of money that SAP reinvests into the software every year. It's in the neighborhood of $2.5 billion. So more money goes back into the product to make it deeper, wider, easier to use than most other companies make in a year. So it's a big perspective piece that it's the same basic product from a code base that's been in use for 44 years. It's going through a refresh right now. But the code base itself is still the same. So it's just gotten stronger over time rather than being thrown out and restarted over time. So that's the view of SAP and who uses it and why. And then from an Emergis perspective, why we see customers choosing us is our experience. Even though we do have some younger people in the crew, they're always staffed along with experts. So our average experience is about, and we used to have that on here. So there you go, about 10 years domain expertise on the left there. We've been doing SAP and basically just SAP for just over 17 years. We've got over 220 implementations successfully executed in the global market. We are a global company, so we do have the main group is in the US. We have offices in Canada, India, a little bit in Europe, and I'm missing in some China and South America. So you see that over on the left as well. Our consultants, as I said, we've got a mix, but we hold over 100 certifications among that consulting group. And the way that we interact with SAP, we have to recertify yearly from across the board, whether it's trying to sell the product, we have to recertify each year, implementing the product, we have to recertify, supporting the product, we have to recertify. So it's not just one and done. It is a constant evolution. And as the product changes, you have to have that constant evolution or you fall behind as a partner. So that's a little bit about Emergis. We do cover from a manufacturing perspective, discrete, high-tech, aerospace and defense. So we started to get into more project-oriented manufacturing environments there, medical devices and all the lot traceability, potential serial traceability that goes along with that, and chemical and more in a process environment. So from job shop all the way to repetitive process in the middle. So whether it is a configured order type business or a make to order or a make to stock, forecast to stock, SAP manages all those, and it can manage them one software, one site, doing all those different things. So you don't need to really set the software up uniquely and doing a lot of extra work to do a mixed mode type operation where you're doing some make to stock, some make to order, some configure to order. The software allows you to do them all in the same facility, in the same software package. From a footprint, really high level perspective, the way we bundle SAP from a software perspective for the manufacturing space, and the AES is our accelerated enterprise solution. And what we basically do is take SAP best practices in these different core areas like financial accounting, like warehouse management, sales and distribution, and we go through that grouping of best practices, which there's about 500, and we subset it into about 125 to 150 that are focused in the manufacturing space. And then as we engage with a customer or a prospect at that point, we winnow that down to typically about 70, 75 that makes sense for them to roll out. So while the footprint starts really large, we narrow it down to turn on, to activate, to implement what each specific customer needs. They can always turn more on later. It's really the software's there. It's a matter of how much they want to use day one and how they want to evolve over time. So that's the footprint. The other side of that is just because it's not in that bundle doesn't mean it can't be delivered. So I said there's about 500 different best practices. There may be something from a wholesale distribution vertical, if you will, that someone in manufacturing might want to use. Well, we can just put that on top. Transportation management's a good example of that. A lot of manufacturers don't transport their own product, but some do. So they start to blur the lines between a typical manufacturer and a wholesale distributor. So we pull some of the functionality from wholesale distribution and associate it with manufacturing, and the footprint gets a little larger to meet the unique business needs of the specific customer. So you also see business intelligence here in the bottom right. We typically bundle a BobJ grouping, business objects grouping of Crystal reports, dashboards, analysis for Excel, and so on. Or we deliver Lumira, which is more of a predictive analytic tool. Sometimes we deliver both. It's really up to the customer again. And all this is sitting on a platform of a NetWeaver stack, SAP's NetWeaver stack, which allows, it's a leading hardware, software integration piece in the market, and basically we're coming to market with a HANA instance, and the HANA instance is both the hardware and database in an appliance format. So basically we're grouping the two and delivering it as an appliance ready to run with the software on it. The other thing is Emergis can offer some options as far as how we deploy, right? So SAP is a best-of-breed solution. It's scalable for whatever size. I showed that with the pyramid. There's billion-dollar companies using it all the way down to, the small and medium-sized environments. It can obviously handle complexity or wouldn't be able to support over 26 industries. It's flexible in the way it can be deployed, so it can be an on-premise solution. Emergis works with Amazon and some other hosting companies to host it, and after the 5-year payoff, if you will, so we also finance. We can finance over a 5-year time frame, and you can own it when you're done and just end up paying the maintenance, but you can make payments over the 5 years. So it's not just that the software is really flexible, the implementation and what Emergis can do for you becomes really flexible as well. So from a demo perspective, SAP is a management tool, right? It's a tool that, like any ERP system, should show you where the issues are and let you deal with the issues, not force you to look at everything and go figure it out. So it is a management by exception tool, and what you'll see in the presentation here, the demo, is that it's very good at giving insight to the user so they can then take action, and whatever the insight's telling them is bad or potentially going bad, they can drill right in and resolve those issues either before they become major or resolve the ones that are out of hand already and get the business back on track. So the insight to action is really the big message here. You're going to see across the business as we go here, we're going to look at a day in the life picture in a minute here, and you're going to see from different user perspectives, from a sales rep through a buyer through a production environment, kind of what they would be dealing with from a software perspective to do their job. This is a day in the life process that I would suggest is a very high-level view of the world. Go much more granular than this. You don't see quality in here, but quality can be totally integrated both at the goods receipt portion of the procure stack here. It can also be embedded within the production stack. It could be embedded in the delivery process as well, where we've got specific customers that need a certificate of conformance. We can identify that and have the system generate it along with the other shipping paperwork. So this is not the end-all, do-all, but it's a good roadmap to give you a flavor for what SAP can do for you. And what's happening here as we go through is it's really designed to walk through and show you different pieces. So we're going to look at sales order fulfillment from 2 different levels. One's going to be more of the strategic, and one's going to be more of a tactical. So I'm going to start with the strategic and look at issue resolution from a sales order fulfillment perspective. And what we've done is actually recorded the different transactional steps here, transitional steps here. And what this screen really shows is the issues that exist today in the order process, in the supply process, in the delivery process, and the invoice process. You have the ability to sort this view in different ways. You can see the different steps there that we could sort on. We can dump this out to Excel and look at it. But the real value here is that we can drill down on any one of these and drill into it and resolve the issue from the dashboard. So here's the insight to where the issues are, and you can drill in and take action on the specific issues. So in this case, there's a delivery issue, and what's happened here is this was a short ship. So line 10 got delivered, line 20 here did not because it didn't have material. That material is now available. So we create the delivery, execute, and this drops off the list. You refresh the list, this one's no longer there, to move forward to the next issue. So it makes it very simple for a user who's trying to expedite, who's trying to manage the back order flow, to really do their job. So again, more of a strategic versus a tactical person who's just executing deliveries, who's just executing, taking a sales order, and so forth. So that was that. Now we're going to actually look at more of a tactical, and this is the first step, and this would be taking a sales order. So here's the sales order process, and basically we're going to click on create sales order and then process it through. So the first thing, we're tied to a specific customer, so we could change customers from the one identified at the top there, number 3. We can actually do searches for product. We have the ability to have images applied to these, and then it's very much like shopping on Amazon. You add it to the cart, you review the cart, do a checkout. You can change quantity, dates, those kind of things as you go through. You get to see the pricing. You come in, and an optional field is purchase order. I've made it required in my suite, my solution, so I have to enter that. And finally, place the order, and we get confirmation that the order's good to go. In the background, we can have printed out an order confirmation, emailed it as a PDF attachment, auto faxed it. There's lots of options. EDI the information to the customer. Depends on the type of business again, and how big you are, how eloquent you are, and how your customers want you to interact. So what would have been printed out by default, assuming you didn't change any of this, is an order confirmation that would look something like this. Obviously, it would have your logo, your address, and phone numbers. The rest of it's pretty much boilerplate textually, and then the specific information is pulled in. Here, I had a bunch of notes on the items, so they show up here. And you can see both the list price, the tax, and the total. So configurable, the tool exists within the application to actually create these, change these. And as we go back to the day in the life, I'll show you kind of where they're embedded in the business flow, because we probably won't go look at any more because you can make them look however you want. So that gives you some visibility into what you can generate in the application. And the way that the shape of that specific object in the day in the life, purchase order confirmation would happen. You can generate the shop traveler, pick lists. Pick lists can have barcodes, so you can execute your picking by barcode, by handheld, by however you want to. You can do a desktop as well. The shop traveler can also have barcodes, so you can scan the work that you're doing within the shop traveler. Delivery note, bill of lading, packing list. So the ones I've identified here are turned on in my system, and I've got about 18 or 20 turned on. There's over 100 defined. And again, you can create your own. So it really depends on your business flow. We can meet the business flow based on the different types of forms that we have in the system to execute. So that's the first phase of it. Now we've got an order in there, and we have to manage. So we've got demand. We have to manage and or create supply to meet the demand. So again, let's look at this from a strategic planner's perspective. And this is the Material Requirements Planning Cockpit. It has a view of some of the high-level drill downs that can be made, so overviews. Once you drill in, you start to see the color coding and see things that are marginal, bad, good, how they're changing over time. You have the ability to come in and apply filters, change filters, create filters, so you can actually create new filters and then save those new filters as tiles. So in this specific scenario, we're creating a very specific filter list, and once we get it, we're going to create a new tile. So if you think about it, you get a specific demand or a specific rush order, you're dealing with the rush orders first, you can create a new tile to go on the dashboard that always represents that information, and that's the first thing you do when you come in. So now we've made this special and said, okay, here's our focal point, and now we're actually going to go in there and execute against this focal point. And what SAP is going to do is really provide options on how to satisfy the shortage that exists here. Because let's face it, typically in material requirements planning, it's a shortage. We either have to move an order out, move an order in, cancel an order, increase an order, those kind of things. So what you're seeing down at the bottom is increase, change, transfer. Really 4 options, and you see different stars on them. The more stars, the better the option. So if we increase the existing order quantity, that'll work, but it's not the optimal solution. If we change the order, potentially split it, that's an option. If we change the quantity we're procuring, that's an option. If we transfer from another facility, assuming we have another one that has this material available, that might be a solution. But as you make your selection here, it solves the problem, so you visually see that, and it takes it off the list as something that has to be done. So it is, again, that insight to action we talked about before. You get the visibility to where the issue is, you can go in and resolve it. So strategic again, tactically, material requirements planning's been run. We can come in and look at a purchase requisition that's been created, and we can convert that into a purchase order. So that's what this is all about. You can have approval cycles. You can approve at the requisition. You can approve at the order. You can approve at both places. So this allows you to select one or many purchase requisitions, automate the assignment of suppliers, and if there's not one that can be automatically assigned, and it'll move to the next queue, if there's not one that's automatically assignable, the system will come back and tell you that and let you manually do it. So the idea here is that we're processing one from the approved, it's now assigned, it's now simulated as a PO, so we're just going right through the wizard at the top, all the way into the conversion from a purchase requisition into a purchase order. And like I said before, the purchase order may also require an approval, really up to how you want to configure that, how you want to work with us to configure the system. So we've seen taking an order, so we've got demand in, we've executed planning from the material side. We have the ability to look at the purchase order confirmation, like I said, similar to what we saw on the sales order. It's just got different types of information on it. And we have the ability to execute a goods receipt. One too far. So in the goods receipt, depending on what product parameters exist, basically you identify the purchase order. It'll populate, and you get the tabs down at the bottom, the material, the quantity, where you're going to put it, some other information. If the item is lot traced, lot batch traced, or serial traced, those tabs would also show up at the bottom for you to enter that information or identify that information. So SAP does manage life limited product. It does manage unique product like serialized product. And the final step would be the payable side of this, to go through the entire procure to pay process. So you can enter the incoming invoice, and here what we're going to do is reference. We can reference the purchase order or the goods receipt, depends on how you're matching. Some companies always assume that what was on the PO was delivered, so we should invoice the whole thing. Some always want to match it off the delivery because it doesn't always match the PO. So let's go with the most recent document, which is the delivery, and use that to generate the invoice placeholder so that we can pay the supplier. We don't want to pay him for what he said he was going to deliver. We want to pay him for what he actually delivered. And then So we've got the material that we need. And, you know, if it's a long assembly process, we might not do all the material up front. You know, if it takes us a month to produce the end item, we might stage material so we're using different material at different workstations each day. That's totally doable in SAP as well. So it's really about what you need to do to execute the business the way you need to. So we're going to look at the production order execution now, and we're actually going to drill in, and we have the ability to create from that requisition a production order. We can see the material here, we can see the labor tasks here, we can release it, we can schedule, we can do a lot of different things. We can cost it. We can automate all those things. We can automate the creation of the shop traveler as well, which is what you saw on the pop-up there. So a production order has been created. This actually took a requisition and converted it into a production order. Now this is very tactical, right? We're doing one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. There is the ability to also do group or more global activities. So I could have done a mass conversion of production orders, not just a single production order at a time. So those capabilities exist. This starts to get into the idea, here's some material, here's the operation that has to be done. This is the material tied to that operation. This could be many pages long, many operations. Each operation could have material associated with it. It could have all been issued at the front. If quality's turned on, rolled out, implemented, the quality steps would also show up here. And then I believe the final thing we're going to do is look at consumption of labor and material. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to backflush some material and labor for the entire order. We can do this at the operation level. Actually, we're going to do this at the operation level. We can do this at the operation level. We can do it at the, so we're doing descending, looking at when they're due. You can see what's planned, what's confirmed, and what's remaining. So in this case, nothing's been confirmed. So that should tell you that you can do partial confirmations. You can also execute the goods movement as part of this, like I said, a backflush. And SAP will let you backflush lot batch material. And what it'll do is it'll consume the oldest material first. So it's going to do a FIFO, first in, first out transaction, if it does it in a backflush and you've set it up to do that. So you don't, even at that level, you don't have to manually intervene. The system can help you manage it based on a rule set that you decide on. So that was entering demand in the system, satisfying the purchase side of the demand, satisfying the production side of the demand, and then basically it's available for consumption by the customer. So fulfillment, pick, pack, ship, delivery, whatever you call it at your facility. So that's the demo portion of this. We could have continued on and shown the entire flow. Typically time doesn't permit, so I cut it short after giving you a flavor of what's available and what can be done. I talked about this a little while ago about how we start with over 500 best practices, and Emergis basically groups those down to what we typically see in a manufacturing footprint. And that's what these next couple slides are, just to give you an idea of the starting baseline, if you will, that we're going to start working from with a prospect, with a customer, to get down to what they actually need. So, you know, here a good example is this engineer to order quotation process. If a company is strictly make to stock or make to stock and make to order, even some configure to order, they might not do any engineer to order. So they wouldn't need that. We would realize that during the discovery phase, and we would not include that when we were to estimate or propose the cost for the implementation. Because basically all this is activating more code or turning on more code to be actually used at the specific customer site. So just as an example, and you could probably look through here and see, you know, let's say 8 or 10 that don't make sense. And that's what we typically expect. We expect that 125 is going to go down to 70 to 75. On the supply side, same thing. So again, here's an engineer to order. If you're not doing engineer to order, that would come out. Some people do make to order, but they don't do configurator. That would come out. Some people don't do order splits. So again, this is that high-level view, and then it's picking and understanding what's required. So you see here, this one's with variant configurator, this one's without. So this is a true make to order. This is a make to order where a variant configurator is involved. Some people have both processes, some just have one or the other. You see some lean manufacturing, repetitive manufacturing functionality in here too that's very specific. So Kanban or Kanban, depending on where you are in the country, how you want to say that. Quality that we talked about, you know, this is at the procurement level with vendor evaluation. We also have it at the production level. All the way into tools. So you can do tool production here. You can associate tools with production. So if you need a specific torque wrench for a job and it's a high value item and it's not on the floor, you can actually have that be part of the order. So it tells you need to go get it from the tool room, use it on your job, and then return it to the tool room. So jack stands, jacks, cranes, there's lots of different tools that make sense to do that with. And then more from the financials piece of it here, SAP does allow you to do actual costs. It lets you do average actual. It lets you do, standard cost. So you've got some flexibility there, and you can do a mixed mode. So if you've got a lot of volatility in your buy side, you can do actual or average actual on the buy side, and you could do standard on the manufacturing piece of it. And you could switch that. If your volatility is in the manufacturing process, because everything's a little unique, you could do actual costing on the labor, and you could do standard costing on the procurement side. So flexibility. Overheads can be calculated automatically, so just pointing out a couple different things. Service side, some people sell service, some people maintain what they put in the field. There can be a lot of money made in the service and warranty side of the business. Some only do the internal maintenance, so they maintain their own equipment, and that's all they do. So the rest of these would fall off because they're not required. So you start to see the idea behind how we could start with 125 and quickly get down to 70 or 75. You can find all kinds of stuff on here that probably doesn't make sense to you in the environment you're in. But it gives you a good idea of how big, from a manufacturing perspective, this footprint could be without even adding in anything from like a wholesale distribution. I talked about transportation management as an example before. So the other side of this is, you know, we talked about, I talked about strategic and I talked about tactical execution before. So we talked and looked at putting a whole bunch of information in and executing it, but we didn't do anything about getting information out. So SAP's got over 5,000 standard reports built in, and that number really balloons from there into millions because you have the ability when you filter your data set to report on, you can save that as a favorite or favorites. So you can have favorites against the same report to give you different views of the data set. So that's one side of it. On the other side of it, after you've gotten the result for that report, you can also modify that. So you can move columns around, you can do subtotals, you can graph it. So you can have multiple favorites on that side as well. So I could have one report that's got 5 filter favorites, 10 result favorites or presentation favorites, and all of a sudden I've got all these combinations of reports out of one. So you can quickly see how that can balloon. So there's a lot of flexibility within the core application for reports. This is really talking about the business object side of this. And I talked before on that one of those first slides that had the squares on it with a high-level functionality. One of them had business intelligence, and it had Lumira, and it had business objects. So with business objects, we deliver a starter kit that has reports and dashboards across the product. So you see some for services, purchasing, manufacturing, financials, and sales. So you don't start with nothing, which is pretty common. We'll go in and do an implementation. We did this for years, and we've sold them the tool set for business intelligence, but it's a phase 2 or a phase 4, and sometimes it's just shelfware. They never do anything with it. We looked at it, and these were some of the most commonly requested reports. So what we did is say, hey, why not bundle them in, and day 1 of Go Live, they've got dashboards they can use or reports they can use outside of the core. So now, with that starter set, there's something to compare to. There's something to take, and I can look at the material analysis under manufacturing here, and it's like, I like this, but. So now there's something to compare to. Whereas if you don't have anything, it's hard to do a comparison, right? It's impossible to do a comparison. So that was the idea behind this. So this gives you an idea of the starter kit that Emergis delivers. So this is part of the partner ad that we do. I've got a couple examples of these. So Crystal reports part of this business objects piece. It is part of SAP, and it's hard for me to say it's not core. It is core. It's part of the total solution. It's just a simpler to use reporting interface. So, and instead of just having data in a table, you can actually have the graphics and the table. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here. So this is an example of one. This is a bar chart. Here's one. That's a pie chart. So you have the option to pick and choose based on the media you like. What tricks you out, right? Is it a line graph, a pie chart, a bar chart? So I put one of each in there just to give a flavor to what's available. So there's a lot of flexibility here in how you do these. But that was just 3 to give you a taste. That is 3 of the ones we do. And then there's some dashboards. We do 5 or 6 dashboards in that delivery. And from a production perspective, this one's probably the most interactive. One of the 2 I'm going to show you are the most interactive. But from a dashboard perspective, this allows you to look at cost impact. So if I find a lower cost provider for material and I can move the direct material cost down, my needle's going to go to the clockwise, because if the cost goes down, the margin's going to go up. So I've got my price pieces here, right, totaling this, and then I've got my cost pieces down at the bottom totaling this. So I can see what happens if I lower my price or increase my discount and so forth very easily. And this is very much a what-if tool where you can see how your gross margin changes and your percentage changes based on what you do. So it's a way to justify new machinery. Hey, if I bring the value down of production, and which, you know, the production time is going to go down, the machine time is going to go down, the overhead is going to go down related to that, I can pay this machine off in a year, 2 years, whatever. It's a very quick, simple way to prove the return on investment. So I've talked about the material side, I've talked about the labor side, and I talked about the price a little bit when I talked about discounting. So that's talking about taking value out, you can also say, hey, if we did a 5% increase on specific products because they're the big sellers, what would the impact be? So that's the whole idea behind this one and the value behind it. The other one that has a lot of immediate value is the CEO view of the world, the key performance indicators. Again, the most commonly asked for key performance indicators. And then this, I would suggest, is pretty much focused around manufacturing. You get to see the plan, the actual, and you can see its demo data, so it's not perfect. The receivables overdue is really the only one driving here. And you can see the trend is pointing down. You can also see the ability to drill down. So as a CEO, I get the numbers. I can decide if I just want to pick up the phone and talk to someone and let them get back to me about what the issue is. I can actually drill down, and each one of these that has the details behind it allows the CEO or whoever has access to this to drill in and see a crystal report that has detail in it. So it's not just this level, it takes you to a whole nother level. So this is really 8 crystal reports against this one dashboard, and they're interactive. So a lot of value very quickly at go live with the data set. And one of the things that I've always done from a implementation perspective in the project planning phase of the implementation right up front is ask the question of how are you going to measure success of this project, this implementation? What are your goals and what's the time frame? And some of these always fall into that conversation. If they don't, they do by the time we're done, because they haven't thought about it, or it's not an issue, or they don't even realize it's an issue. And it's interesting what happens when a new system goes in and certain issues come to light really quickly. This is a pulse on the business that can help identify those things right now if they're not known. So again, starter kit, it's meant to whet the appetite, give some very good functional capabilities right away, and allow the user base to grow off that. So Emergis has the ability to offer, and this is based on a 100-user license group with Lumira and Business Objects Edge, hosted with maintenance, with all that functionality we talked about, financed over 5 years at this kind of rate. Now, obviously, if the user quantity changes, that's going to affect this. More BI users would affect it. More footprint than what's shown here would affect it. So there are things that can drive this up, can drive it down, obviously, but it's a good baseline, and it makes us very competitive in the market. And it's an eye-opener to most people when we're talking about SAP, and it drives me right back to that pyramid. SAP is not too expensive for the small and medium market. It can be priced very effectively, as you can see here. And after that 5 years, all you're doing is paying software maintenance. Basically, you've just pushed the price of implementation across 5 years instead of getting hit right up front or after the first 90 days or 120 days. And we typically implement, Emergis does, 13 to 17 weeks to get this up and running and go live from start to finish. So you get to ROI much quicker with Emergis as a partner, with SAP as a software tool, management tool, than you do with about anybody else. So that's it from the presentation and demonstration perspective. I'm not sure. I'm going to pop back to Ivan here and see if we've got any questions in the queue that we should do our best to respond to. Worst case, we'll come back and respond. We will make this presentation available after the session, if you want to download it, you'll be provided a link to do that. So, Ivan, did anything come in while we were doing the conversation?
Yeah, Mark, first, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the information provided. And yeah, we already have here a couple of questions. Let me tell you the first one that we got here is, what about quality management functionality if it is included within the AES package that we're talking about?
Yep, so I talked about this a little bit, and I showed, I pointed it out a couple places in the supply chain piece. So there is an abundance of quality functionality within SAP. You can do qualitative, so touchy-feely, good, bad type inspections, as well as quantitative, which is more measurement-based. You know, it's plus or minus a specific fractional set or value. So, and it can be a mix of those. So you can have a simple step, a very complex multi-step inspection plan. You can do it at goods receipt. You can do it at production order completion or throughout the process. It's integrated with service if you're doing any service type work. I think I talked a little bit about being able to do it to execute certificates of conformance. There's audit functionality, so you can go out there and audit your suppliers. So there's a ton of functionality there. It really comes into, there's vendor evaluation as well, sorry. So there's tools to do subjective and objective parameters for vendor evaluation. So some things will happen in the system as you turn them on, and some you can be objective and identify what, you know, how you feel about their performance. And you can print that out, you can send it to them. So there's a lot of capability around quality, and it's throughout the product.
Okay, I think that has been cleared out. Second question we have here, Mark, it's about the warehouse management feature. It sounds that you mentioned it, but you never really touched on it. Can you please share some details on that?
Sure. So SAP's got a couple levels of inventory management, right? Inventory management at the highest level is, here it is for the whole plant, the whole facility. And then you can have versions of that, so you can have multiple locations like that, high-level locations. You can then segment the locations into, from a warehousing perspective, down into the row, bay, tier, all the way to the bin. So here's the row in the warehouse, here's the shelf unit, here's the shelf, and here's the bin or the box on that shelf. We can go all the way to that level. I talked about barcoding, so there is the ability to do RF scanning. Basically, SAP mirrors it or identifies it in the system, allows you to mirror that in the tool that you're using, whether it's a smartphone that you're going to use to scan or some other RF device. You know, Symbol Technologies is the one I hear the most often, but it's not by far the only one. Just one, unfortunately, I'm most familiar with. You can do wave picking, guided put away, much more. So there is quite a bit of warehouse management capability, and as usual, I point to the picture. Hopefully, I at least pointed to the picture and said something up front, and I know I didn't come back to it. For whatever reason, I never do. But as a example, if I do a goods receipt, because I did a goods receipt on the procured item, if that was warehouse managed, depending on how it's set up, it can tell you exactly where to put away, so directed put away. It can be very specific, it could be more vague. And what I had was just inventory management, so just put in a storage location, so very vague. Anywhere in this whole facility, as an example, is a way to do that. So that's the warehouse management piece.
Okay. The third question we have here from one of our attendees is, in terms of mixed mode manufacturing, Mark, can you explain to us what this means?
Sure, that's where I started to talk before, and sometimes I don't mention it, at least I mentioned it this time, the mixed mode. So make the stock I basically execute a forecast and build to stock, and then we sell from stock. Make the order. I wait till I get the order, and then I produce specifically for that customer order and then deliver it. A variation on that is configure to order, where I will be taken through a menu of features and options to pseudo-design a particular product so I can make it and deliver it. Engineer to order is pure design. It may be design of a piece of the end solution, some of the stock, but that's more the engineer to order side, and everything's going to be unique just for this one order. We may never, and it may be a prototype, which may eventually go into production, those kind of things. And then, so that's one side of it, right? The other side of it is the repetitive side. So discrete, make to order, configure to order, those are all more job shop. We're going to bring it in, we're going to make a group of them, and we're done. Where repetitive, I'm making the same thing over and over and over again. So if you look at pills for pharmaceutical, you look at bottling companies, you look at, and I know I'm talking more, starting to go more chemical and those kind, but anything that's on an assembly line specifically is going to be more repetitive. So that's doable in SAP. And then we also talked a little bit about lean manufacturing, process manufacturing, where we start with a recipe and make product is supported. And I can't remember if I touched on Kanban. I know I talked about it in the presentation. Project manufacturing for more defense-oriented. Typically, project and engineer to order go hand in hand. They don't have to, but typically they do. And the benefit of SAP is you could do all those different types of manufacturing in the same product. And that's not unique, but darn near unique in an ERP solution. Any more, Ivan?
Sorry, Mark. Okay, thanks for that information. I have here the fourth question provided from one of our attendees, and I quote, it says, you showed some tactical and some strategic views on the demonstration, but is there a view where it is easy to tell order progress across the business?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there definitely is, and SAP thrives on statuses, and status change occurs as actions occur. So as we, that order, we released it, status changed, the production order. We scheduled it, the status changed. We costed it, the status changed. We reported labor, the status changed. We issued material. Every one of those things causes a status to change. So you can easily, there's more than one screen reports that will allow you to filter on status and look, or just see where it is by opening a record, and you can see in the reports, you can see all the statuses, or you can just filter down on a specific one, and in the view, you see all the statuses it's gone through. And if SAP hasn't given you enough statuses to manage it, you can also have user-defined statuses where you can set them up and put more rules behind them. A lot of people use statuses, especially when they're adding their own, to drive workflow. So as an example, the procurement cycle in SAP has workflow and it's built in and it's designed in. The sales order does not. So people will typically use statuses, create a couple, and then build workflow around the statuses. So that's that one.
Okay, understood. So the final question we have here is in terms of scheduling. Does SAP have any tools for functionality scheduling or functionality scheduling?
So in the production order, I just mentioned scheduling. Basically, you're releasing the order for scheduling, and then the shop floor supervisors who are running the different work centers, running the different lines, they can see if there's a priority on the order. They can schedule by due date, and they can manually resolve due date issues. There's also, I don't know, 12, 15 different scheduling views, depending on how you want to do it. There's tabular views, tables of data, and graphical views where you can basically release the product, dispatch it for work, and then manage it against that work center in a Gantt chart. So you can move things, you can move orders around, you can drop them in and see the impact, and it's a simulation tool. So you're simulating all these orders and their impact, and you can see when things are going to be late. You can see the impact of dropping a new one in, what it'll push out, those kind of things. Once you're all set, then you save it, and it updates everything. The other thing you can do in those views is you can change the order, you can split the order, you can change capacity in a work center, add another shift, add a couple hours. So you have all the tools in one place you need to manage the schedule, sorry, and the load in that schedule to effectively meet the customer requirement as best you can.
Thank you, Mark. Well, those are all the questions we have from our audience, so I don't know if there's anything you want to add onto this event, any comment or additional message?
No, I just say thanks for attending, thanks for listening. Hopefully you learned something. I expect it was informative. I just don't know how informative. So hopefully it was very informative for everybody involved.
I think it was, Mark. Thanks a lot for the information provided today. Thanks for your time. And since there are no more questions, we will go ahead and conclude today's presentation. You will get a quick poll on this event, so please help us fill that out in order to improve on our efforts. Thank you all for attending today's session. Again, thank you, Mark, and hope you all have a great rest of the week and the start of the year.
Thank you.